you can hear my voice, if you are watching me on the screen, you can literally be 100% certain that what you have been taught about your emotions is absolutely false. We live in an extremely shame-based society that essentially puts this blanket of shame around the emotions we feel in our body. And what that blanket of shame does is it pushes down our emotions. But what people don't understand is that you can't control all of your emotions. And so, what people do in and out of relationships is that they go up into their head and they start weaving these stories that are not true to distance themselves from their emotions. Okay. And then the more they distance themselves from their emotions by getting into their head, they are actually distancing themselves from an authentic aspect of who they are, their needs, their boundaries, their desires, and even their sex energy, that biological energy that exists in the body, that exists actually as life force creative energy. It's the same energy used to create a baby. It can also be used, that wavelength of energy can also be used to create art, to create work, to create new iterations of yourself, to create this beautiful, robust, co creative relationship. And when that distancing happens between the body and then up into the mind in a relationship, both partners oftentimes do this, the intimacy literally dies. Why? Because intimacy is not just sex. Intimacy is to really see into somebody, to really allow them to see into you, to be as close as two people can get. But if you are not close with yourself, then it will be impossible to be close with the other person. And what happens over time is that the more distance you get from yourself, now there's only a little part of you left. And the more distance your partner has from their self, there's only a little part of them left. And it's those little parts that are interacting, creating a co creative relationship, but it's not the full embodiment. It's not the full expression of what it could be. That causes a lack of intimacy, that causes a decrease in sex drive, that can even cause disgust towards your partner. It can cause things like not feeling fulfilled, not just in your relationship, but not feeling fulfilled in your life, which then leads to a lack of meaning, a lack of purpose, a lot of pain in the body. And that can, right, not always, but it can lead to things like addiction, can lead to things like high anxiety, depression, all of these things. So we're just going to unpack all of this. Watch this with your partner if you feel like they would benefit from this as well. And this is, let me say this. This is actually true for all relationships, what I'm going to speak about. So it could be friendships as well, definitely your relationship with yourself. But I am going to really frame it in the context of a romantic relationship because I want to include that sex intimacy piece, which is obviously just there for, I guess, relationship with yourself as well, but mostly just for your romantic partner or dating partner. Before we dive in to the 5 things, let's just briefly go ahead and unpack what emotions are, because like I said in the beginning, none of us have been taught what emotions really are, what they mean, what their purpose is, and how to bring the light of your awareness into your emotions so that they're functioning biologically the way that they're meant to. So emotions are kinesthetic, right? So kinesthetic is one of the 5 senses. If I do this, I feel this kinesthetically. This is external kinesthetic. Emotions are internal kinesthetic. Feelings that are in the body. So emotions do not exist in the mind. They are not constructs. They are feelings in the body. The same as if you were to get up in front of a stage and recite your favorite poem in front of thousands of people or give a speech, you would feel butterflies in your stomach. And you can literally take your hand and be like, right, I feel it kind of down lower, but I feel it in my stomach. Or if you've ever been right about to cry, you can feel a lump in your throat. Or if you've ever been heartbroken or have lost something or someone that you love, you feel heartbroken. You can take your hand and be like, yes, right, I feel painful sensations here. in my heart. And so the body is, all bodies, self-protective mechanisms, meaning they are self-preserving. They will do anything to self-preserve itself physically. And then for humans, because we have a prefrontal cortex, we will go about doing anything to preserve our sense of self the same way we would go about preserving our life as if a lion or a tiger were attacking us. We go through a stress response when we are attacked physically, and we go through a stress response when we perceive a threat to our sense of self. So our sense of self would be like who we think we are, who we want to be, how we perceive ourselves, anything around our self concept. So when emotions are produced, just like if an actual lion or tiger were attacking, the body would produce fear. This is a real basic understanding, but there's so much more detail to this. But the body would produce fear, right? And in that instance, we can all look at that and be like, well, the fear isn't bad. Of course not. The fear is wonderful. Why? Because the body is producing that adrenaline and that cortisol and all of these biochemicals and hormones in the body so that that person who's being attacked can run the fuck away. They can run away really, really quickly. And that is a very self-loving aspect that the body does for us. So it takes all of that blood flow away from the digestion and into the extremities, and it starts to gear up for potentially even a fight. It might start to produce some more testosterone. The body goes through this whole process out of self-love. Okay. The body will always produce emotions at its root out of self-love. Another way we could say that is out of self-preservation, but I like self-love better. And they really mean the same thing. It's like, hey, I actually really value my life. I value being here. I value my body. I want to stay alive, and I want to keep things as they are right now because I love myself so much. So as we're working through the emotions, as we're going through these 5 things, know that the body will only produce emotions that are for you and always at its root, self-love. So you're probably wondering at this point, that doesn't make any sense, Kate. I feel emotions all the time that are extremely fucked up, that give me fucked up thoughts. Yes. So that is a realm of truth as well, but we have to unpack it a little bit deeper because all emotions exist on like a vibrational scale, we could call it. So at the very, very top, we have the yummy feel good emotions. We know what all of these are. This is like joy, love, peace, the ones that feel really good to feel, that feel comfortable, that our personality, our animal body desires to feel, are all up here. And then as you go down, you get to the middle, you have neutral, like kind of like neutral boredom. And then you go into like pessimism and you get to the deeper layers. And at the very, very, very bottom of the spectrum, you have powerlessness. Okay. So the top is like love, empowerment, joy. The bottom vibration is powerlessness. This is the opposite of a human's natural way of being. We feel best, we operate best, even biochemically, we are in flow state best. That's a whole concept. When we are feeling empowered. So when we're feeling disempowered, it's extremely uncomfortable. So the lower vibration that the emotion is, the more discomfort we feel. We don't like it. And instinctually, because we actually are an animal, we will try to distance ourselves from that emotion as quickly as possible. Why? Because animals are hardwired to move toward pleasure and away from pain. So when there's a kinesthetic emotion in the body that is painful, we'll try to remove ourselves from it. And this is where we go up into our head, and then we can fully disassociate if there's trauma involved. That's kind of like a different topic, but wanted to throw that in there just to kind of touch on it lightly. And then we'll live into these stories that we create in our head in order to distance ourselves from the emotion. I know this is a lot, but now that we have that down, let's look at some of the different emotions so that we can understand why the fuck are they there? If the body loves me, why would it produce it? So when we feel an uncomfortable emotion, it is our red flag waving or our wonderful large sign from our body to take our focus away from the external, Blaming will give away your power. Pointing fingers will give away your power, literally. Okay, it might feel good in the instant, or rather in that instant, won't feel good long term. So it's the calling to take your awareness inward into your body, and you treat the uncomfortable emotion like bubble wrap. Okay, and it's like a bubble wrap that is wrapping up the best fucking gift you've ever had in your entire life. Why? Because the gift in the midst of the bubble wrap is your authenticity. And your authenticity is so wildly unique, so magnetic. It's so sexy. It's so attractive. There is nothing fucking hotter than your authenticity. Literally, this process will bring you over and over and over again to your authenticity. In fact, well, tangent sidebar here, because I do Chinese face reading as well. I do have some videos on my YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe. You can go watch those. They're super fun. But in Chinese face reading, the lines appear on the face from these toxified, repressed emotions. And so as you go through this alchemical process that I'm going to share with you in this video, the unwrapping of the bubble wrap, some of these lines will disappear off your face. Yes, I have seen it, or at least will like lessen. The actual structure of your face will begin to change as more of your consciousness enters your body and you inhabit and breathe life into more of your authenticity. Okay, that was my tangent. Back to the programming. We have this bubble wrap. Okay, this is the process. When you bring your awareness into your body, you are unwrapping that bubble wrap, and you had to unwrap it enough till you get to the gold in the middle, right? So I had said that the gold in the middle, this gift that your body is lovingly trying to give to you via screaming at you through pain, is always one of three things. Okay, write this down. This is one of the most important things of the whole video. If you take anything from it, take this. The gold in the middle of the bubble wrap is one of these three things. It is either a repressed truth or a desire, an unmet need, or a boundary. It's always going to fall into one of those three categories. And here's where it gets really, really fun, because this is where people fuck it up, is that they feel the bubble wrap and they do one of two things. Animal body goes, fuck this. They disassociate into their mind. Okay. That's not going to allow you to work with the authenticity within yourself and within an intimate partnership. So you're kind of like missing the point if you're doing that. The other thing that people will do is that they will feel the bubble wrap, they'll feel the uncomfortable emotion, but they don't have agency and autonomy within it. So they react. That's also an animal instinct. Okay. When you react, you take action based off of the lower vibrational feeling, the felt sense in the body. You are voting for more of that in your life, because this exists at this frequency. When you take action on it, your subconscious, meaning everything below the surface of what you're aware of, goes, aha, okay, we're taking action on this vibration, meaning I should program in more of that vibration. I should constrict my visual cortex, my hearing, all of my five senses in order to sort for, like a little antenna, and look for the people, experiences, places, and things that produce more of that vibration. So both of those two options are not going to lead you anywhere where you want to go. Here is what you do instead. You unwrap it, you get to that gold. And once you find the gold, there's a very palpable feeling in your body that actually feels good. When you drop into, wow, here's a unique part of me that I didn't know about, right? Here's a truth that I have that like I didn't know I had. Here's a boundary that would actually feel really empowered and loving if I could just speak this boundary. When you get to the gold, your internal vibration goes from down here and it goes back up into empowerment. And then it's from the place of empowerment that you want to take action. You're not reacting to the bubble wrap. You're not disassociating from the bubble wrap. You're getting your hands messy within the bubble wrap, getting the gold, and then taking action on the gold. And now we're going to talk about, I know that was like a lot, but that was all really important to say, because otherwise none of what I was going to say next would even make sense. So now we're going to talk about how to apply that in a romantic relationship, how to use this alchemical process so that your sex life becomes more fulfilling, so that your relationships become more meaningful, so that there's more love and intimacy and closeness and all of the things that you desire. And another benefit, you will truly be co creating with your partner. When all of you shows up and all of them shows up, there's this beautiful thing that happens where the sum of that is far more than the separate parts. And that's one of the really spiritual, beautiful parts about a relationship that we get to consciously enter into as a means of growth. Because when you come together with that full authenticity, it requires you to transcend old limiting beliefs, old relational patterns from childhood, generational shit that we have harboring in our body. And the story necessitates an up leveling of who you are and an up leveling of them. And then each of you gets to experience your true self together in its highest form. Okay, let's get started. Number one mistake that people make in relationships is that they don't ever access their gold. And like I was saying, this is a really huge problem because if you're not accessing your gold, there is a piece of your authenticity that is screaming at you biologically to pay attention to that you are shoving off to the side. And then you're only bringing the stories, the masks, the part of you that you think is acceptable into the relationship. And then that's what gets voted into the relationship. This causes a severe lack of intimacy and especially a huge lack of sex drive over time, especially for women. Women, when they have sex, we generally need to experience this emotional aspect to sex as well. There has to be a closeness of our heart and opening, a trust, a safety, a respect in order for us to also want to be really, truly physically intimate in a way that physically, sexually feels really good, where our bodies feel really honored, our hearts feel really safe and open. So, all of that is probably intertwined for all people. So I'm not trying to be like super gender specific here, but definitely generally more so true for women. And so when you perpetually leave the gold out of it, when you are distancing yourself from those uncomfortable emotions, the intimacy is going to be killed over time. And even to take it a step further, if you kind of walk through me on this process, if a woman is showing up, and I'm only speaking about it from a woman because I am a woman and that's what I have reference to. But when a woman shows up to a relationship and she's not emotionally feeling connected, it's going to severely alter the amount of pleasure that she can feel during sex. And so over time, if she's showing up for sex with her partner and there's not enough pleasure over time, she's going to associate just not wanting to have sex altogether. I mean, I literally can't tell you how many friends in long-term relationships that I have had or have now that are like, I'm just not that interested in sex, right? Like blanket statement, but this is the reason. It's because there's so much swept under the rug for her authentic self, for his authentic self, or whatever the dynamic is, that the intimacy actually can't flourish. So, number one mistake people make across the board is not finding the gold. It's an absolutely necessary process. I actually do have more about how to get to that process in a free ebook called The Self-Sabotage Solution. So I will put that below. And then if you want like the full, holy shit, change your life, jump quantum leaps, like literally not kidding, how to alchemize every single aspect of your life backed by hypnosis, backed by processes that I have detailed and outlined out. That's in my course, Rewild Your Release. So I will put that below as well. Number two mistake that people make emotionally in their relationships is that they're not properly detaching the thought from the emotion. There's this enmeshment process that happens. So, an example of this that just recently happened in my life is that I was dating someone about a year and a half ago. And we were very, very, very in love. And it was this beautiful relationship. And for reasons that I won't disclose here, it just didn't work out. It was so painful for me. It is very painful right? Going through a heartbreak, going through a breakup of someone you love. And that's because that person actually becomes intertwined into your nervous system, and our bodies relate relational safety to physical safety. And so detaching from that is always somewhat traumatic, I would say. I actually have another video on that on YouTube. I'll try to link it above. But I was dating this man, and the breakup was so painful. And I'm well seasoned in shadow work and alchemical work. And so I'm moving through this grief. I'm moving through this grief. And there was just so much pain that I ended up creating the story because I was feeling the pain in my heart. Oh, he just didn't love me. And it was this story that, when I really started to unpack it and look at it, was a reflection of my past. It was a reflection of the way that I was raised, some things that happened in my past relative to the masculine. What happens is, when the body feels something that's familiar from the past, the mind will kind of like pull out this filing cabinet of all of the meanings that could possibly be. Why am I feeling this? It finds the file that is most similar, pulls out the file, and plops it onto the emotion. And that's where this enmeshment takes place, because way long ago in my past, there was a meshment between the feeling of heartbreak, the feeling of a lack of love, the feeling of, I guess you could kind of call it grief, because it did kind of feel like grief. The meaning that I had placed on that so long ago was, well, I must not be lovable. Okay. So now that's a story where I am living into that, into my mind. And when I attach myself to that story, it removes me from the pain, because it gives me a reason. It gives me something to kind of point it at. It gives me something to live into to make sense of it. So we all have stories like this in our past, many, many, many stories, and we run these subconscious patterns. And so when we get into a relationship, a lot of this shit is unearthed, as you know. That's why there's emotional triggers in relationships. We can use those triggers that come out to start delineating between the felt sense in the body and the story in the head. So, the end of that story, I recently saw this man a year and a half later, and basically said, I literally have not stopped loving you. I love you so much. And it just, it didn't work out for all of these reasons. But it was interesting because I got to hear that, and I know it to be true. And I actually got to destruct that story. I got to go back in, feel more grief, but keep my heart open throughout the pain and detach from the story. So the enmeshment between our thoughts and the felt sense can be a really big problem, because we end up living into stories that are literally reflections of the past that were actually never true. You are not unlovable. I am not unlovable. No human on this earth is unlovable, but so many people have that story, and then they almost subconsciously seek it out. So one of the best ways to detach and to separate out that enmeshment is to just know that the feelings in your body are always true, to the extent that they are simply happening, right? Like, if I feel heartbreak, the thoughts I have around my heartbreak probably aren't true. I was going to say may or may not, but like, they're usually not true. Okay. That's just the mind trying to apply a meaning of that feeling based on the past. But the feeling in the body is true, quite simply because if you were to unzip me and look at my nervous system, you could be like, oh, right, there's the neural pathways that simulate grief. Yes, there's the hormones that produce the feeling of grief. Yes, she is quite literally feeling grief. And so that's a huge distinction, is just to begin to feel your emotions in your body and not in your head, and start to separate them out. Because a lot of the romantic relational work is actually just rewriting these stories and then bringing that new story and your higher self back into the relationship. All right, number 3, and this one's a little bit more controversial, but compromise. It's not the compromise itself that is the problem. It's how you get to the compromise. There's a way of getting to compromise that feels expansive and co-creative. And then there's the more common way of getting to compromise that feels like self-abandonment. Avoid the self-abandonment at all costs, even though in the moment, that's usually the easier option. Again, one of the beautiful things about a relationship is that when I bring all of myself to this other person and they bring all of their self to me, it forms this third party, this beautiful expression of artwork that can only exist in its highest form when both people are fully authentic. And so, yes, of course, sometimes my authenticity is going to trigger a partner I may have, and sometimes their authenticity is going to trigger me. But when we know that the trigger is just a felt sense in the body that has gold in the middle, then we can look at it and be like, well, that's great. The triggers are okay. I don't have to believe the stories about my triggers, but I can use this process to end up at a solution or a compromise with full authenticity and really be willing to stick it out. Because even if you're leaving like little scraps of yourself off to the side, oh, I'm not going to say that. That's too much. I don't really like this part of myself. I want to hide this part of myself. I'm angry, but I shouldn't be angry. Anytime you find yourself saying shouldn't, bring it into the light of your awareness or into the space of the partnership if it's a healthy partnership that can process that kind of stuff, and really be committed to the solution, to the co-creative solution rather than the compromise, right? So compromise has this contractive energy of like, oh, I guess I'll swallow that. I guess I'll accept that. Whereas co-creative solution, there's expansiveness in that. Okay, the next mistake that I see people make all of the time are just actually simply the way that they talk about their emotions. There is some difference. I'm not going to get into it today, but let me know in the comments if you want me to do a video about it, about the way that men process and speak about emotions, and then the authentic way that women process and speak about emotions. There's definitely overlap and there's definitely distinction because, you know, while we have a lot of similarities, there is a biological difference between men and women. So the way that people speak about their emotions is so funny because they're not actually speaking about emotions. I cannot tell you how many partners I have had or just people that have been in my life that say something like, well, I feel like you're doing this to me. Like, I feel like this is all going wrong. I feel like I am not being loved. I feel like I need to set a boundary and you're not listening to me. I feel like you're not hearing me. Okay. So, all of those examples, I could go on, and I'm sure you can pull from your own reference. Those are not feelings, those are thoughts about the feeling. I feel anger. I feel sad. I feel hopeless. I feel agitated. I feel confused, right? Those are feelings. So when we're speaking about our feelings, make sure you're really speaking about your feelings. And doing it this way is so important because when we have a story is made up. Okay. All stories are made up. The ones that we read, the ones in our head, the ones that we live into, the ones we created from childhood, they're essentially all made up. And they actually come from the exact same part of our brain that distinguishes humans from animals in the wild. It's this part of our brain that has the ability to lie. Okay. Has the ability to lie, has the ability to make up meaning. And meaning is this beautiful thing that we can apply to every facet of our life to feel so colorful and rich in our lives. And the shadow side of that, the dark side of that, is lying. We can literally make fucking shit up out of nowhere. So stories are fucking making shit up out of nowhere. And sometimes we live into useful stories, meaning ones that add value to our life. And then sometimes we live into non-useful stories. When you bring a non-useful story into the space of a romantic partnership, that is an immediate go for a fight because it's made up. So it could, of course, be questioned. It can, of course, be attacked. It, of course, can be seen as wrong or bad or not true. And then it's in that dynamic that now you need to protect that story. This is where people run into trouble, is because when that story is so attached to your self-concept, you will fucking protect that story with all of your life, even when it's not useful. The second it's attached to your identity, you will protect it because of what we talked about earlier. You will feel like a tiger is attacking you. So in a romantic partnership, you want to really work on bringing the emotions to the table and then having curiosity about the story. And in a really healthy partnership, if your partner is open to this, you can bring the emotions to the table and you can speak, I'm running this story and I don't really know if it's true. Would you be willing to help me? Would you be willing to look at it? Is this what's true for you? Let's look at this together. So you're starting to detach from the story in that way too, by learning how to speak the emotions into the space first, because that allows for both parties to be in a space of like, oh, you're feeling anger? Okay, well, you're just feeling anger. You're feeling uncomfortable. You're feeling shame. You're feeling uncertainty. Well, those things can be true, but you're not attaching any story to it that where it can create like a combative kind of scenario. And the last one is allowing your anger to create distance. So, anger is a very demonized emotion. Anger is not at all bad, at all bad. In fact, anger is always empowerment and boundaries that is in action that usually gets stuck by a limiting belief, a limiting story, or just something that hasn't been worked through. But the only time an animal body will produce anger is when it's exhausted all of its other resources to get back up to empowerment. And if it can't quite get there, then it produces anger. So anger is always a push away. It's always like there's a perceived threat coming at me, and I must literally distance myself from that perceived threat. So when your partner is triggering you into anger, your knee jerk reaction based off of a self loving protective mechanism is going to be to distance yourself, to push your partner away. This one's a little bit tricky because what most people recommend is breathe through your anger. Try to release your anger, let go of your anger. And I don't agree with that entirely because that can build resentment over time if you're not also accessing the gold within your anger. Now, if you are struggling with like explosive anger, then yeah, you're going to want to learn some breathing techniques or just some tactics, some tools. They're pretty simple to learn. It's just so that you can take that edge off, but you don't want to get rid of your anger altogether. Because anger is such a primal energy of distancing yourself, it is extremely difficult to stay in your heart, connected to love, connected to intimacy, connected to the long term outcome of I want this person in my life. To stay connected to that and feel your anger at the same time is a really, really difficult thing. So, this one definitely does take practice. But once you really get the hang of it, it is so useful because anger is a very useful emotion. And it usually tells us about all of this repressed gold that we've been pushing down and stuffing down into every nook and corner and cranny of our brain and of our subconscious and of our neurology. And so, when you can feel that anger, but in the presence of love, and allow your hands to reach into that gold and bring it out, your fucking life is going to just up level in massive ways. Again, the problem can occur if you get rid of the anger altogether. You're only breathing through it, you're only getting rid of it. That builds resentment because the root, the gold, is still there. And your body's going to keep generating this. And resentment is almost like stale anger. It's like anger that's been around for a really long time. And then, obviously, on the other side of the spectrum, constantly reacting to the bubble wrap of anger. It might feel like empowerment in the moment, but you're not voting for the long term solution that you actually want. So, those are my tips for you about how to have really next level, healthy emotional skills relationally for a better sex life and more intimacy, deeper intimacy, more meaningful life. Hit like on this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Hit subscribe. I'm going to have tons more videos specifically for men and women dynamics, masculine, feminine dynamics, also around trauma, emotional health, emotional healing, and really getting into the biology, the authenticity of how our bodies are designed to handle life and to handle relationships.